Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I was watching a popular YouTuber, DistroTube, and he was talking about the best software center for Debian and Ubuntu. And while I agree with his, I guess his conclusion that these software centers are kind of bad. I mean, if you look at some of the software centers, they are pretty terrible. Um, the Ubuntu Software Center is probably a little bit worse than the GNOME Software Center by default in Ubuntu because it doesn't include support for all the different types of packages like Flatpak. Um, and that's kind of unfortunate because I mean I don't agree with DistroTube in the terms that all these different software packages, these software stores shouldn't exist because as a software developer, there's not a lot of ways to monetize your apps. Now, there's nothing wrong with monetizing apps as long as they're open source in the Linux world, right? So when you want to monetize your apps, there's no good way to do it. There's no good way to distribute it. You have to set up a bunch of infrastructure. Nowadays, it's a little bit easier with GitHub and things like that, but it's still nice to have these pretty pictures. So some people they're not strictly a terminal user. They're not strictly text readers. Now, I personally agree. I subscribe to that same kind of ideology. I like text. Just give me the information. I don't want a whole bunch of flash. I mean, sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. But not everybody's like that. Some people, especially people who are just consumers, they want to just click on something, look at the pictures. They don't want to read the text, and then they want to say, "Oh, this looks good," and then they'll maybe read some comment from someone and be like, "Oh yeah, it's got good reviews, so I'm going to go and use it." They're not going to install it, evaluate it from a very sophisticated perspective for their use case. I mean, some people they're definitely like that, but a lot of people they're not. So I think the app stores hit a niche, and that's the niche. But even then, these app stores don't go as far as they could, right? So in the Linux world, we have way more flexibility because we don't have, shareholders, we don't have all these marketing departments forcing constraints in different areas. For Linux, you can basically just, have a whole bunch of creative ways to display information and include more useful information. So if you were, say, for instance, on one of these software stores and you wanted to know not just like the reviews, but how many people are using it, right? Or how many people have installed it and what distributions they've installed it on and all these kind of things. When somebody hits the server, you could collect that information. And that kind of information could be useful for software developers to know uh, what kind of distribution people are using and if something's happening on a specific version of a distribution. I mean, otherwise you have to kind of collect all that stuff manually. And yeah, it works. You can do that, but that's just one side of the coin. There's so much more information. You could connect some of this open collaborative stuff so people could support your project. They could integrate asking for features by actually supporting the project and giving money to have those features implemented. So like, let's say, for example, we're looking at news Newsboat. Newsboat is something I personally use. It's an RSS feed in the terminal, and you can just quickly read news from popular sources. So let's say they had an open collaborative integration. You clicked on the open collaborative integration. You said request feature, and then in order to request a feature, it also allowed you to enter in the amount of money that you're willing to put up for that, and then you could enter your credit card information and put that money up, and other people could support it and put their money up, and then eventually, have something happen. Right now, a lot of this software, it doesn't have like a central location to have your information stored in, in a way that you would feel comfortable with. One of the reasons people love to use Amazon is it's just so fast. I just click. boom, boom, add, or buy now. You just click one button and you're in. You're done. So that's one thing. There's a whole bunch of more open source software that is just not being used. There's open source services that aren't being used. You could connect some of these softwares with some people's GitLab, and then you could have direct interaction with the developers. So they could be submitting issues through the software centers, and it'd be super easy to find your um, your developer and then talk to him. So that's what I'm saying. Is like, and then this could just be one integration. There could be several integrations. You could include GitHub. You could include, SourceForge. You could include all open collaborative. You can include Patreon. You can include so many different integrations into these software centers. They just basically added the bare minimum to keep up with what Apple's doing or whatever. They're not leading, and that's why I think this software is kind of it's just they just put it out there to say, oh yeah, we have it, but yeah, they're not very good. And these images, they're fine, but you can't click to increase the image size, so that's kind of stupid. You just have to look at these very small images. It's not, it doesn't expand. It's not a responsive interface. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this software is not very good, and they need to put in more effort. So even on KDE Discover, it's got similar problems. I think they can actually expand the windows and stuff like that. I mean the pictures, but yeah. So now the Synaptic Package Manager, that's like a completely different use case. The Synaptic Package Manager is more for like getting at all the packages. And that kind of brings me to another discussion entirely. So this is my personal view, is that a package manager should be for the operating system. It shouldn't be for, so like the distro maintainers, so they can push out updates for libraries and things that the operating system uses. I think, with the advent of these compressed one file applications, it makes a lot more sense just to use something like Appimage, and you, that should be the package manager for your apps. So the things that developers need, they can go to the package manager that's built for that operating system, or they could have a container that's specially made to include all of their specific library versions that they need, and then those things can be cross-referenced. So that's more of like the getting technical with some of the flat pack related specifications and Snap. They kind of have some of those libraries bundled up into different versions so that different packages can use. But Appimage, it's a little bit different. It just compresses it all down into one file. You get that file that it's exactly as the developer intended it to be. And there's different things you can do with app images. A lot of people think that, app images, they don't integrate with your desktop. They're just a file, you just click on it. That's not really true. There's something called Appimage D. Appimage D is App Image Daemon. So that daemon will, help you with, getting some of your URL specific links. Like if you're clicking on some link that's supposed to open up a magnet link or something like that, it'll still make those connections if you're using the daemon. They have other self-updating things, and they have a whole bunch of features that people really don't know about, and they don't know about them because most of the distributions are all pushing their either Snap for the major distributions or Flatpak. So those are the two things that the distributions are personally pushing. Arch people are more into just throwing everything into the AUR, which maybe that's a good method to go about it. But it's not much different than app images, and app images solves a larger problem. The larger problem being, how can I make one program and distribute it to all Linux distributions, all Linux users? And that's what Appimage solves. So even though we have Snap, we have Flatpak, it still requires the integration. You still can't just run it. It still requires a lot more work. The app images are more, they're not like Windows. It's more of like Mac. I'm not a Mac fanboy, but it's more like Mac because the Mac images, you just drag it over to the applications folder, and then it's installed technically. Now, you could have an experience like that if a distribution would actually integrate it a little bit better. Now, they have different solutions for this too. If you want to have a package manager, you can use something called Zap. Zap is an Appimage package manager. Now, there are other solutions where when you're just opening up an Appimage, it will there's software included, like people have already developed this software. You can throw it into your Appimage build process, so it will automatically update the app on its own, right? And that's part of the infrastructure that's already built into Appimage. Like the code's already been pushed out, right? So those are two different options. If you really want a package manager, you can do this package manager thing. If you want to have just the app update, it's kind of up to the developer on which way to support it and things like that. I mean, you could technically, if you were trying to get integrated into a distribution, you could force it, but then, that's not really the Linux way of doing things either. So, yeah, I think to get something like Zap working, it's again another centralized location where everybody uploads their applications, and you can have some form of discovery. So it's again the same thing. It's basically a discovery platform. It's not really like that's the same thing that the package managers kind of are for people who are just looking for apps. They're not trying to develop. They're not trying to do anything else. It's basically just a discovery platform. So for a discovery platform, this is your discovery platform. So yeah, I think a lot of people, they just don't have the right ideas about this kind of stuff, and if they bothered to look into it, I think they would agree that this is probably a good way to go. App Images solves a lot of problems, and it just all the people who are maintaining packages for various distributions, that's a lot of wasted effort. Only the OS specific packages, I believe, should be in the package manager. All these apps should be pushed out to basic user land stuff, unless it requires kernel level access or something like that. Then obviously those things have to be accepted into a package manager in the distribution or the operating system. But as far as just apps, all you need is a website to discover applications and have reviews, because not everybody's technical. They need reviews. They need to know, what are people saying? Has somebody done a security audit on this software? Is it safe, right? Especially with all these Electron apps and all these very fast updating apps. If you don't have multiple eyes on this software, and even when you do have multiple eyes on this software, you're not always going to have 100% security. So, and that's one of the reasons why people like reviews. They like to be able to submit it to some authority, thinking that they're the ones that are going to check this. When a lot of the time, they don't have super strict checking going on. It just depends on what store you're talking about. If you're talking about something that's a little bit more sophisticated that does automated scanning, that's different. But yeah, so app images are the way to go. If you trust the developer should be the one pushing out the app image. I noticed in a lot of these app stores, especially with Ubuntu Snaps or Flatpaks, a lot of the time the people that are packaging this stuff up, they're not the developer. So who knows what those package managers. So not only do you have to trust the developer, then you have to trust the package maintainer. Maybe the package maintainer doesn't trust the developer, so he's doing a good job checking phone home calls and letting you know, disabling anonymous tracking. I mean, there are situations when the package maintainers do things like that, and that's when a fork is called for. And those are all good things. But I'm just saying that from the get-go, it'd be much better if they were all maintained by the actual app developer, and it was an easy process, and all the distros just supported the same thing. So that's why I think if people just supported the Appimage, I think the only reason why people don't like it is that maybe you're going to have, 10 megabytes more for the size of your file. Really, after you get enough of these files, it's not really that big of a deal. Even NVMe drives for 1 terabyte NVMe drive is like $100. It's going to go down even more soon. So storage is very, very cheap, and this solves a huge problem and a lot of wasted energy with package managers, in my opinion. So you can have the best of both worlds. You can have one package to rule them all, but keep that at the user level, and then the user can just use this Zap thing, and they can use it all across all distributions. It doesn't matter what distribution you're on. Now, if you're doing development, obviously you're going to have to do distro-specific development because they have their own specific implementations for everything. But yeah, so that I just wanted to bring that up because I kind of noticed he was talking about stuff, and he's doing it more from like a very specific mindset because he loves to have text terminals and tiling window managers and lots of configuration, and just wants to get at the meat and potatoes, doesn't want any of the fluff, which I agree with. I think that's great, and a lot of time I want the same things. So, but not everybody's like that. So I think it's good to have a system set up in place and the proper perspective of what these various tools are actually for. So these app stores are discovery platforms for applications. So developers have incentive to put software out there, to work on software. So not everybody is independently wealthy. They need money. So this is a good way to support getting money. And from what I see on these app stores, there's no way to buy anything, I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong. There might be some way to buy stuff. But I don't see any applications that require you to buy anything. And I think Elementary OS, last I heard, they had something which seemed really cool. They were being innovative, but a lot of these other ones, they don't have anything. I don't think. But yeah, so that about wraps up this video. I just wanted to quickly go over, all that stuff. I've heard a lot of people say some really weird things about Appimage just because they don't know, right? And all the other operating systems, the distributions have adopted Snap and Flatpak to some varying degrees, but they've just totally done no education, no inclusion for app images. So it's kind of sad actually because Appimage is a great solution. I mean, just like Android has the APKs, you can include jails and containers around these app images. You can confine their permissions. You can do all that same stuff that these other solutions are solving. But the technical way that Flatpak and Snap are going about it is, in my opinion, over-engineered. They don't have to go that far. You just need one isolated package you can run and a way to get it to your users. And I think that's going to be best for developers. And it'll be best for the Linux ecosystem, in my opinion, too, because no longer will people be messing with their packages, and will those packages somehow interfere with their operating system and just totally destroy their operating system. Now the user's actions will be completely segregated from those situations, and hopefully that would increase stability for the generic normal person who's just trying to install apps. Obviously, if you're doing development or you're trying to modify system D or XOR configurations, or you're doing something custom, then obviously you're on your own. You can shoot yourself in the foot with Linux, but just having a safer environment in those kind of situations so that people can't shoot themselves in the foot, because it's like the safer playground. And then if you want to move outside of the playground, no problem, you can. It's Linux, right? But yeah, that about wraps it up. I'll just end that here, and thanks for watching.